The morning sun rose low and pale, as if it too were grieving. Jonah Kiptoo stood beside the mother elephant's body, his boots sinking slightly into the moist earth. The scent of damp leaves, decay, and quiet finality surrounded him. A thin layer of mist clung to the tall acacia branches, swaying like veils at a funeral. He had arrived just after dawn, following the circling vultures like a reluctant pilgrim. He had hoped, foolishly, that it wasn't her. But the matriarch lay still, her flanks stiff, one ear folded awkwardly beneath her. She had been strong once. He remembered her from years ago, her defiance, her gentle nudges to the young. Now she was just mass and silence. Beside her, a small shape, crumpled, no movement. The calf, barely a few months old, had curled into her, tucking its face beneath her jaw, as if still nursing invisible comfort. Jonah had waited, watched. For hours, he stood at a distance, whispering prayers only the wind could hear, hoping for a twitch, a breath, a refusal to accept. But the calf never stirred. By midday, the sun sharpened its blades through the trees. Heat pressed against the back of his neck as Jonah retrieved his worn shovel from the Land Rover. He dug slowly, reverently, like peeling away time. The ground was stubborn, roots coiled through the soil like old regrets, but he kept digging, glancing over at the calf. Still nothing. He made the grave shallow. The earth was hard and his heart heavier. He wrapped the calf in a faded canvas tarp he had used for years. It smelled faintly of engine oil, sweat, and eucalyptus. As he lifted the small, lifeless body, something inside him cracked, something deeper than bones, older than memory. His arms trembled, not from effort, but from that strange grief that settles into a man's spine when the world gives him no one to carry home. He laid the calf down gently and covered it with the same earth he had once walked as a boy, chasing birds with a slingshot and believing all things were eternal. The final pat of the shovel echoed louder than it should have. Jonah stood back, hands on his hips, then on his knees, then just still. The silence buzzed. Even the insects seemed to hush. As he prepared to walk away, his shadow stretched long across the grave. But he didn't move. Couldn't. Something, he didn't know what, kept him rooted. His fingers brushed the old crucifix tucked into his shirt pocket. A gift from Miriam. Gone 6 years now. He hadn't prayed since she passed. Not really. And yet, he whispered something. Not in words, but in ache. A breeze swept through the clearing, then a hush, then a shift. The soil moved, just slightly, a ripple, like breath returning. Jonah froze. Then the ground moved again. Jonah didn't move, couldn't. He just stared, eyes fixed on the freshly packed grave where the calf's body had been laid just minutes before. The dirt had shifted, not from wind, not from settling. It had risen, as if something underneath had pushed upward. Then it stopped. Then again, barely perceptible, but real, like the earth itself was breathing. He dropped the shovel. If this story reaches your heart, follow this page. We tell stories that words alone cannot hold. Stories of silent healing, unexpected grace, and love that doesn't need to speak. Now back to Jonah. He took one slow step forward, then another. His boots crunched over leaves and memory. The canvas tarp beneath the soil had started to bulge, just slightly. Then stillness. Then a twitch, a shift, a sound like the soft gasp of a newborn catching its first breath. Jonah dropped to his knees and began to dig, not with the shovel this time, but with his bare hands. The soil clung to his fingers, dry on the surface, damp beneath. He tore it away, fistful by trembling fist, uncovering the tarp. And then, a trunk, small, caked in mud, lifting feebly, then falling. Jonah let out a noise, part sob, part prayer, part disbelief. The calf was alive. It hadn't been still out of death, but out of shock, dehydration, maybe even some reflexive instinct to stay hidden. He didn't know, didn't need to. All he knew was that life had refused to be buried that day. He uncovered the rest of the calf's head, brushing dirt gently from its eyes. They fluttered open, clouded, barely responsive, but open. He placed a hand over its chest. The rhythm beneath was faint but steady, like a miracle tapping softly from inside. "I'm here," Jonah whispered. though the words never left his lips. He rushed to the Land Rover and returned with his emergency satchel, saline, glucose, blankets. His fingers worked with the muscle memory of decades. He poured water into his own cupped hands, letting it drip slowly into the calf's mouth. It didn't drink, but it didn't resist. That was enough. The day faded as he worked, the clearing now a sacred room. A resurrection had taken place, silent, unannounced. There were no witnesses but the trees and sky, and Jonah, who no longer felt quite alone. He sat beside the calf long into the evening, stroking the base of its trunk, humming something from his childhood. He couldn't recall the words, only the tune. It was soft, circular, like a lullaby that someone had once sung to him and forgotten. And then, when the last light of the sun fell behind the trees, the calf stirred. It lifted its head, just barely, looked at Jonah, and Jonah wept. Not because he was afraid, not because he was sad, but because in that one look, the calf had said something that didn't need words. You stayed. At dawn, the clearing looked different, not because the sun rose any softer or the wind moved with more kindness, but because something inside Jonah had shifted. Something in the space, too. Where there had been a grave, there was now a bed. Where there had been stillness, there was breath. Faint, but present. The calf hadn't moved much through the night, but neither had Jonah. He'd stayed close, kneeling on a patch of flattened grass, hand resting near the young trunk, listening for that rhythm. Inhale, exhale, pause. Again, still here. He'd covered the calf with a fleece blanket from the back of the Rover, careful not to startle him. He didn't know if the elephant could hear well or see, but the animal seemed to sense presence, warmth, calm. Every so often, the calf would flutter an ear or shift its front leg, but never enough to rise. Not yet. Jonah knew that. Healing came like sap from a wounded tree, slow, invisible but always moving. There was no signal in the clearing, just trees, birdsong, and the heavy hush of early light. He scribbled a note in his small notebook. Calf, Sharper 342, found unresponsive, presumed dead, revived, mild pulse, hydration initiated, eyes open, stillness, but not death. Will stay. He underlined the last line twice. Then he began again, not with shovels or ropes or fear, but with care. He created a soft perimeter around the calf with logs and brush, not to trap, but to cradle. A safe womb of forest, man-made but gentle. He brought buckets of water from the stream, 3 trips, pouring the cool liquid into a shallow basin he dug with his hands. Then soaked cloth in it and laid the compresses gently over the elephant's legs and belly. There were flies, too many. So he smoked some green leaves in a rusty tin bowl, letting the smoke curl over the calf's back, his own body shielding the delicate trunk from heat. The calf blinked once, then again. Jonah didn't smile, but his heart did something close. He moved slowly, speaking only in breath. Every motion was deliberate, ritualistic. Fold the blanket, dampen the cloth, wipe the eyes. Repeat, repeat again. He remembered how grief had moved through him after his wife died. Not in great waves, but in these same small motions. Fixing tea, folding sweaters, brushing hair from a picture frame. The things you do not because they change anything, but because they remind you that something mattered, that someone did. Now, his fingers, stiff with age and calloused from years in the brush, moved like a father's might. Not fast, but present. By midday, the calf tried to lift its head again, didn't succeed, but tried. Jonah whispered nothing, just offered a soft push under the trunk, a silent, "You're not alone." And again the calf tried. It was enough. Later, he found a half-eaten leaf tucked beneath the calf's leg, perhaps clutched during the collapse. It was browned and wilted now, but he left it where it was, as if some small part of the elephant's past had chosen to come with him into this second chance. A second burial, this time of fear, of assumptions, of rushing to conclusions. Jonah's stomach rumbled, but he didn't move. Instead, he peeled a banana from his pack and split it down the middle, placed half on a flat rock beside the calf, just in case. Not because he thought it would eat, but because the offering mattered. Hours passed like syrup, slow, sticky, sweet in their silence. He spent part of the afternoon reinforcing the shelter, cut branches, wove leaves into a kind of roof, temporary but protective. He left one side open so the calf could see the trees. He believed, maybe foolishly, that a wounded creature should never lose sight of the wild it came from. The jungle could become a cage, but not if you kept the line of sight. As the sun began its descent, casting long shadows across the clearing, Jonah noticed something. The calf's breathing had deepened. Its ears, so still before, twitched again. Then its trunk just slightly lifted from the ground and pointed at him. Not high, not steady, but directly toward Jonah. He froze, not out of fear, but reverence. The gesture felt ancient, as if some language older than words had been spoken. Recognition, not of a name, but of an energy, a memory being written in real time. He reached out slowly and touched the trunk. It curled, not fully, not tight, but enough to let him know. You stayed, and I see you now. Jonah didn't cry, but something behind his ribs loosened. A dam in the soul, not the eyes. The kind of ache that says, you're not broken anymore, just different. The night would come again, with its fears, its shadows, but for now, there was breath, touch, and a bond stitched from silence. Tomorrow would ask more, but today had given back what he thought was gone forever. Hope. By morning, Jonah had stopped counting the hours. Time no longer passed in minutes, but in breaths, in movements, in glances. The calf had slept through the night, head resting on its folded forelegs, chest slowly rising and falling. Not deeply, but enough. Jonah didn't sleep. Not truly. He dozed in shifts, seated against the bark of an acacia, one eye half open. A ranger's instinct, a widower's habit. But when dawn poured through the canopy, soft and golden, something had changed. The calf was standing, not fully, not confidently, but on all fours, legs trembling like saplings in wind. Its ears flicked forward, then back. Its trunk searched the air like a blind man's hand feeling for shape. And when it found Jonah, still, quiet, cross-legged just beyond the logs, it paused, then took one step forward. Just one. But the meaning was undeniable. Jonah didn't move, didn't reach out. He simply let the moment pass between them like a slow exhale. Not earned, but allowed. The calf stepped again, then hesitated, as if the ache of its body pulled like iron against the will of its spirit. But it pressed on, 2 more steps, then stopped at the rock. The rock where Jonah had placed the banana the day before. It was still there, brown now, softened by heat. The calf lowered its trunk, sniffed, then with surprising precision, nudged the banana from the stone. It didn't eat it, just touched it, then looked at Jonah, and in that glance, raw, wide, wet with light, was something ancient, something that didn't need to be named. Gratitude, recognition, a flicker of trust. Jonah rose slowly, knees stiff, heart louder than his boots on the soil. He didn't approach. He circled wide, picking up the basin of water he'd left nearby. Without a word, he poured some into a clean indentation in the rock. The calf watched him, unmoving, as if memorizing the rhythm. Then it stepped forward again, closer, and drank. Not like a newborn, but like a creature reborn. Slow, deliberate, savoring not just the water but the stillness around it. Jonah exhaled through his nose. A silent prayer, not to God, but to the quiet. To whatever power held space between man and beast, and bridged the canyon with grace. Over the next few hours, they moved around each other in a slow ritual. Jonah built. The calf watched. Jonah cleaned. The calf approached. He brought fallen fruit from a tree nearby, figs, sweet and sticky, and placed them near the sleeping spot. He didn't force contact, didn't coax or bribe, just showed up, again and again, the same way he had shown up for Ruth in her final days, with presence, not pressure. Every time the calf lay down again, Jonah laid a hand gently across its side. It didn't flinch anymore. The tremors had stopped. The fever, too. That afternoon, clouds began to gather. Thick, dark ones. The kind that promised more than just shade. Jonah looked at the makeshift shelter and knew it wouldn't be enough. He moved quickly, clearing the rover, rearranging supplies, folding blankets, creating space. He looked at the calf, then at the clouds, then back. A silent conversation. "You trust me now?" The elephant didn't nod, didn't move. But when Jonah opened the back of the vehicle and stepped aside, the calf took 2 steps, then paused. Jonah waited. Then the 3rd step came, then a 4th, and suddenly, impossibly, the calf was inside, folded, cramped, but calm. Jonah sat in the front seat, rain beginning to patter on the windshield. Not yet a storm, but close. He looked in the rearview mirror. The calf looked back, not at his reflection, but through it, and then closed its eyes. As the first thunder rolled across the sky, Jonah whispered, not with words, but with the gentle clink of keys turning in ignition, the slow roll of tires over wet soil, the softness of breath through lips too tired to speak. This was not the ending. It was the beginning of something neither of them could yet name, but it had started here, in a clearing marked by 2 graves that never held death, only waiting. The road to the sanctuary wound through hills of ochre and dust, where acacia trees bent like old men, and the wind carried the dry laughter of leaves. Jonah drove slowly, not because of the mud or the ruts or the weight in the back, but because something sacred was unfolding, and haste would dishonor it. In the rearview mirror, the calf slept. At first glance, it looked lifeless again, curled awkwardly, trunk slack, legs folded beneath. But then a flick of the ear, a shift of breath, not restless, but surrendered, safe. Jonah didn't speak. He hadn't in days. Not to another human, not even to himself. But in the quiet of the cabin, with the rain tapping like soft knuckles on the roof, he hummed, low and steady, an old tune Ruth used to hum when nursing sick lambs, or during long nights when storms made the roof weep, the same melody he'd once whistled while rubbing her feet after long days on patrol. A song without words, just a thread of sound, warm and circular, like a promise. The calf stirred, a soft exhale, a stretch, then a sound, barely audible, a gentle thrum from its throat like a distant drumbeat. Jonah froze, then smiled, just a twitch of the corner. But it was there. By the time they reached the sanctuary's outer gate, the storm had passed. In its place, puddles reflecting blue sky, sunbeams dripping from wet branches, and birds calling again as if the world had reset. The ranger at the gate, a young woman named Lindiwe, stepped out of the small booth and stared. "Jonah," she mouthed, walking toward the vehicle. "Is that?" He raised a hand gently. No words, just a look. "Trust me." Lindiwe nodded. No questions. She simply opened the inner gates. The vehicle rolled through into the compound, modest, scattered with corrals and thatched shelters. It wasn't fancy, but it was safe, clean, watched over. Jonah stopped by the medical pen. Together, they gently guided the calf out. It stepped cautiously, every movement deliberate, but no collapse, no resistance. Jonah stayed close, always one pace behind. As they reached the padded mat laid out beneath a canvas awning, the calf paused, then, with slow grace, lay down on its own. No prompting, no coaxing, just choice. Jonah stepped back. He'd seen miracles before, in the wild, in war zones, in Ruth's hospice bed. But this was different. This was resurrection. The vet, a soft-eyed man named Dr. Themba, approached with care. He ran his hands gently over the calf's sides, listening, touching, pressing. He said nothing for a long time. Then quietly, the abscess drained, naturally. No sign of infection now. He'll make it. Jonah nodded. He didn't ask how or why. He just looked at the calf, now licking droplets from a shallow bowl, and felt a weight lift from the space behind his ribs. That night, Jonah didn't return to his post. He stayed in the small cabin beside the pen, sitting on the porch with a blanket around his shoulders, and tea going cold in his hands. He watched the calf sleep, watched its sides rise and fall, watched the twitch of dreams behind its closed lids. And then, without warning, the calf stood, walked, not far, just to the edge of the pen. Then, with almost human intention, it reached out its trunk and placed it gently against Jonah's arm, not asking, not testing, just being. Jonah didn't move. A breeze passed between them. Light rustled the canvas roof, and Jonah whispered a single word, tamu. It meant sweetness in Swahili, not for flavor but for soul, for things that could not be described, only felt. The way rain smells on dry earth, the sound of fireflies, the warmth of a hand after too long alone. Tamu. The calf blinked once, as if it knew, as if the naming was mutual, as if, from this moment forward, they were no longer ranger and orphan, man and beast, but two beings who had carried grief to the threshold of something gentler. The sanctuary never asked for paperwork. Tamu never asked to leave, and Jonah. He never returned to his old route. He stayed. Seasons changed in slow, golden circles. The sanctuary aged like a memory softened by time. Its fences faded, trees taller, the same old tin kettle still whistling on cold mornings. Jonah stayed. Not because he had nowhere else to go, but because nowhere else had felt like a rival. Every morning, he walked the same path from his small hut to the edge of the inner clearing. Every morning, Tamu was there, now towering, tusks ivory and clean, skin crisscrossed with time. Tamu had grown into the kind of quiet strength Jonah recognized from the mirror. Not fast, not flashy, but still, present, earned. He never left the sanctuary, not once. Even when the outer gates were left open during transport, even when curious visitors cooed or tempted with mango slices, Tamu stayed, always within Jonah's sightline, always within reach. Their rituals became silent scripture, a shared bowl of warm mash at dawn, a slow walk at dusk to the field where the moonlight dusted everything silver, the soft single touch of trunk to shoulder each night before sleep, as if to say, "I'm still here. You too?" No one asked why Jonah no longer took new assignments, why he stopped his long patrols or retired from leading ranger teams. They could see it in his posture, in the calm around him. He had become the still point in a world of motion, and Tamu, once a breath from death, had become the reason the sanctuary whispered of miracles. But time, as always, kept moving. Jonah's hands grew slower, his steps shorter. On certain days, his fingers trembled as he tried to tie his boots. The scar on his shoulder from an old fall began to ache more sharply when it rained. Then one morning, the bowl remained untouched. Tamu waited. Jonah's door remained closed. Tamu waited longer. By midday he rose, slow, deliberate, and walked. Not through the gates, not toward the other enclosures, but to Jonah's cabin. And there, beneath the window, he lowered himself to the ground. Not with panic, not with alarm, but with knowing, like he had once lain down in the forest all those years ago. This time, not in surrender, but in vigil. Hours passed. No one approached, not the staff, not the vet. They'd seen it before. This was between them. Inside, Jonah lay curled under a faded blanket, Ruth's old scarf still looped at the foot of the bed. His breath was shallow, but his eyes were open, fixed on the window, where a soft shadow moved just beyond the curtain. He smiled once, not out of fear, but gratitude, for the life returned to him, for the silence that had never been empty, for the friendship that needed no words. When the final breath came, it was quiet, like a page turning. Tamu stood. He did not trumpet. He did not cry. He walked, out to the wide field bathed in dusk light, where Jonah once pointed to stars and whispered stories. There the great elephant knelt once more, and stayed, for 3 days. On the 4th, he rose, walked to the center of the sanctuary, and began to dig, not wildly, but with purpose, a shallow basin in the earth. The staff watched from afar, hearts trembling, tears unsummoned but falling. By the 5th day, the hole had filled with rainwater, and Tamu did something he had never done before. He stepped into it and bathed, slowly, reverently, lifting trunkfuls of water to the sky, letting it fall on his back, again and again, each splash like a memory washing off the dust of grief, each ripple echoing the quiet hum Jonah once carried through the forest. That pool remained, even after it dried. They called it Jonah's Well, a place no one touched, not out of reverence, but because every now and then, on quiet mornings, Tamu returned, to sit, to breathe, to remember. No plaque, no shrine, just soft earth, a waiting sky, and a story carried between hearts that needed no language to be understood. And if you stood still enough, long enough, you could hear it, the echo of one man's presence and one elephant's trust woven into the wind, forever.